Hi everybody, welcome back. In this next sequence of videos, what we're going to be looking at is how we can try to value environmental goods and natural resources. These are intrinsically hard things to do, as we talked about in the last sets of videos there on public goods and common resources, where a lot of these environmental goods, they don't have prices attached to them. So if we're thinking about how do we value something like clean air, or clean water, or national parks, that's a very tricky thing to do. And so environmental economists have developed some techniques to work on this, and that's what we're going to be looking at in this set of videos here. So first, we're going to discuss the things, the different aspects of value, what provides value, and how can we think about value, and then we'll look at some valuation techniques. We'll look at a few in addition to the stated preference and revealed preference techniques, but these are the more common ones, and especially revealed preference is very common within environmental economics. So first of all, let's talk about the different sorts of things that provide value to humanity. Again, maybe pause the video and think about a couple more examples here. We've got clean air and water, all sorts of natural resources that we can use for the production of things, for recreation, so on and so forth. And what else? So we have wetlands. Wetlands are extremely valuable. We have arable soil that allows us to grow food, and then recreation, outdoors. So among many other possibilities here. So a whole bunch of valuable environmental resources, and they all have value in different ways. So when we're thinking about policies and putting policies in place on how to estimate how much of a tax should be put into place, because if these things provide positive externalities to us, or if depleting them creates negative externalities, then we should put in some appropriate subsidies or taxes. In order to do that, we have to know how much it's worth, and that provides us this problem. So the problem we face is that many benefits we obtain from the environment are not derived from market transactions. Many benefits we obtain from the environment are not, I'm going to move this up. Okay, many benefits we obtain from the environment are not derived from market transactions. Are not derived from market transactions. So they don't have prices. That's the thing we talked about with public goods and common resources. And so what are we going to do about this? Well, we still need to do cost-benefit analysis. But this is going to be a cost-benefit analysis using a standard metric. And the metric that we're going to use for that is some sort of monetary value. So, for example, dollars. Just like we also talked about in the videos on consumer surplus, producer surplus, and efficiency, these ideas can give us a sense of the economic welfare or well-being of society. And that consumer surplus and producer surplus and total surplus is measured in dollars. And so if we measure the benefits of environmental goods in dollars, that's going to make easy comparisons and easier policy decisions, because dollars is something that we can inherently understand. So we're going to take non-market goods, like clean air, for example, and assign them some sort of dollar value in order to put policies in place to protect them or expand them or any other sort of policy. Okay? And I do want to mention here that we're not just talking about the financial value of a resource. Doesn't mean economists only care about the financial value of a resource. For example, if we're thinking about a forest, right? You have a whole bunch of trees. We're going to assign a value to that forest. In economists' eyes, the value is not only the value of the timber if we go and cut the forest down and use it for lumber. The value includes all of these other ecosystem services, habitat, carbon sequestration, all of these things. These are included in an analysis that is well and properly done. Economists include these things in the value of that forest. It's this idea of opportunity costs. It's not just the financial value, it's the entire economic value. So a lot of times economists, and maybe in some cases are appropriately thought of as maybe a little cold-hearted, but in this case, a properly done economic analysis is also going to include these intrinsic societal benefits in addition to whatever other financial value a resource has. Okay, so just getting that out of the way, let's talk about the different ideas of value and where value can come from with environmental goods. So we're going to have two broad categories, use value and non-use value. We're going to start with use value. This is the value placed on the tangible or physical benefits of a good or a service, including direct and indirect use. So that's kind of a lot there. Let's write it all down. The value placed on the tangible or physical benefits of a good or service, including direct and indirect use. Okay, so now let's break down direct and indirect. Starting with direct, the value we directly obtain from using a natural resource, that actually would be something like we discussed above, the harvesting a tree to get lumber. That is a direct use of that tree. Or something that's still direct, although it may seem a little bit less so, visiting a national park. Okay, a national park has a lot of outdoor recreational opportunities. If we are directly hiking or going to take pictures or viewing wildlife, we are directly using that natural resource. But like I said above, with the forest, there are also indirect uses and values that come from these environmental goods. So a couple examples here could be something like flood or erosion prevention. trees do a great job at helping to prevent erosion in streams and rivers and such. So that would be an additional value of that forest, but it's an indirect use. So flood prevention, soil formation, or, I mean, among many possibilities, pollination by bees. Huge benefit to society with bees pollinating our food, but that's sort of an indirect use derived from us protecting some sort of environmental resources that help to protect the bees. Okay, so these are the use values. These are things that are a little bit more closely related to human activity. We have direct and indirect. Now we go to non-use values. So these are values people obtain without actually using a resource. Let's start with that. Values people obtain without actually using a resource. So value people obtain without actually using a resource. So essentially, we could almost think of this as psychological benefits, including existence, option, and bequest values. Okay, so non-use values, value people obtain without actually using a resource, including existence value, option value, and bequest value. So let's talk about those three. Let's start with option value. So even if I never, and I should also say this option, existence, and bequest values, they're all actually in many ways quite similar, and a single environmental resource may have not only all of these non-use values, they may also have the use values. So to give a few examples here, the option value. This is the amount people are willing to pay for a resource because they may use it in the future, right? I've never been, for example, to the Great Barrier Reef. Right, this is that large and apparently beautiful coral reef in in Australia, and I may still have a value associated with that because maybe I'll make it to Australia in the future and I would like to see it. So even though I haven't seen it yet, I might have a willingness to pay to protect it or assign some value to it because I want to have that option open to me in the future that I might go see it. This could also go for, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or just in general other national parks. And so essentially I want the option to see it later, so therefore I assign value to it now. Bequest value is in a way very similar, but even though I might not be able to make it to the Great Barrier Reef or to some national park that I'd love to see, I still might want it to be available so that maybe my kids can go see it one day. So I'm going to just write that again. The Great Barrier Reef but this time for my kids or grandkids, or maybe I want it for my great, 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 great grandkids. Ultimately, that idea, once you start thinking about future generations, this idea comes to what's called discounting, and that's how much I care about now versus how much I care about the future. The higher my discount rate, the more I discount the future, the more I live for the day, kind of. That's a topic for a different discussion. But discounting is thinking about how, the trade-off between the recent versus the long term, near term versus long term. Okay, so bequest value, thinking about future generations, I bequest this natural resource to my children, for example. And then the last one is existence value. And again, I'm gonna use the Great Barrier Reef again as an example, among others. I may never think I'll go to the Great Barrier Reef, and maybe I'm also never gonna have kids, or I don't care if my kids go see the Great Barrier Reef. But I still might place a value on the Great Barrier Reef just for the fact that it exists and I care about it. Just this existence, knowing that it exists, can still provide me benefit. So this is, an example of, Great Barrier Reef, again, could be there. It could be in all three of these. Even if I do want my kids to see it, or if I want to see it in the future, option value and bequest value, then I could still also have existence value, just because I think it's an important thing. So other examples here, polar bears. I may never go see a polar bear. I may never think any of my children are going to go see a polar bear. But I still may think polar bear or other different types of species around the globe are important. So I can assign it existence value. And then finally, the example I have fully in the notes is a non-traveling Midwesterner placing value on the protection of coastlines against oil spills. So even if I live in the middle of the country, never plan to go to the ocean, I may still value coastlines simply for the fact that they exist and I want them to be beautiful. So, yeah, a number of possibilities there. These are just a few. And to kind of sum up all of those ideas, we have this chart. And this dichotomizes the total economic value into use value, non-use value, and then all these other things we talked about with a few examples. Okay, so that's a nice little summary figure, and yeah, that should help. So anyway, the way that we obtain this total economic value up at the top is we just add everything together. So I may have some use value, maybe direct or indirect, or both. Same with all of the option, bequest, existence values. You just take them all up, aggregate them, sum up all the values together, and that's going to help to analyze the benefit side of a cost-benefit analysis. And I should say, the cost side of an analysis is pretty easy. So in this example, which I talk about here, if some government is thinking about putting a national park into place, the cost of that is going to be, compared to the benefits especially, relatively simple to calculate. Okay, you're going to have, however many, say 10,000 acres, how many acres there are, how many acres of woods there are, rivers, streams, all the different land use types. How much you're gonna have an estimate for how much you're gonna be spending on fire mitigation, on park management, park rangers, Forest Service roads, and all of these other, things that go into the maintenance of national parks. So analyzing the cost is a relatively easy exercise. But what is the value of a national park? How do we analyze the benefits a national park will have on the society, the nation? If it's going to be a national park, what's the value of that park to the entire nation? Because all of our taxes are going to go toward paying for that. So what I want you to think about here, which is going to lead us to the next video, is how can we figure out how much people value the benefits of a national park? So I'll give you the two answers here, but then we're going to talk about them in detail in the next video. So think about that for a second, pause if you need to, but essentially there are two primary ways. One, you could just ask them. Ask people how much they care about national parks, and ask them even to assign monetary values to it. We'll talk about some of the pros and cons of that. But this whole idea is called stated preference. So I can state through a survey how much I value national parks. So you can ask them, or you can examine their behavior. And even though something like a national park or clean air or water quality is not measured in the market, we still do things, we still interact within market activities that are related to national parks. So we travel to national parks. That requires spending money. Or maybe we really love national parks, so we go live next to one. That requires spending money on a house. There are all sorts of market transactions associated with the non-market goods, environmental goods. And so with that, we can examine the behavior, and we don't ask people what their preferences are. We just look at what their preferences reveal. So revealed preference. How do people actually behave to show their preferences? And that's the second. So we'll talk about a couple others as well. But yeah, these kind of are valuation techniques that we use to think about what's the value, what's the benefit of natural resources. And that's what we'll be discussing in the next video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.